Hello everyone. Yes, we have some new rumors and leaks on Zelda remakes, an upcoming Nintendo Direct, and an interesting theory on Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Obviously, when it comes to leaks or rumors, you need to take into account the person's track record with a bit of your own common sense. While some of this is just laughable, it provides us with a great opportunity to correct some misinformation or straight up lies from a few of these so-called leakers by using actual facts and what we really do know. Our last video on Breath of the Wild 2 rumors received a lot of amazing comments from all of you. A wonderful Patreon supporter sent us this Breath of the Wild 2 article asking our thoughts. So as a thank you to everyone being so great and requesting me to do more videos in that style, I decided to also make this video in a similar relaxed way. First, the big Breath of the Wild 2 article, then we will get into those rumors. This comes from Screen Rant, and yes, there is quite a bit of misinformation in this article. Breath of the Wild 2's broken Master Sword can fix its big Breath of the Wild problem. The latest Breath of the Wild 2 trailer shows the Master Sword broken. The sequel can use this to address one of the first Breath of the Wild's biggest flaws with its weapons. The broken state of the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild 2 presents an opportunity to solve the biggest issue surrounding the weapon in the first Breath of the Wild. It almost seems like a copy and paste of the previous paragraphs. The sword's temporary nature was the biggest issue players of the first game had with the supposed Blade of Evil's Bane. I wouldn't say supposed, like that's just the title they give it, the Blade of Evil's Bane. However, the Master Sword being broken in Breath of the Wild 2 lends the chance to correct this misstep. That's like the sixth time he's given that same sentence in a different version. Fans have been told precious little about what actually is going on in the story of Breath of the Wild 2. I think that's a bit relative. We do have quite a bit of information, but for like major plot points and stuff, no. With gameplay only being shown relatively recently, and story details still being few and far between due to the vagueness of the trailers. The vagueness gets to a point where Link has a different arm in Breath of the Wild 2, yet he does not have a different arm. Yet fans still don't have much information. As can be expected, this also extends to the Master Sword being broken. So no, he has like some pretty cool jewelry on that arm of his. He doesn't have a new arm. Presumably he does have the power to control that weird spirit hand thingy. We're yet to see what the full purpose of that is. Basically, nothing is known about why or how the Master Sword has been broken. Yes, we know. It's pretty obvious for the people paying attention. It was the malice that we can see on it. There is even concept art of the Master Sword being broken from the original Breath of the Wild, and in fact there was a broken Master Sword meant to be in Breath of the Wild and is still able to be obtained in it. Obviously, the most logical answer at the moment is that the Master Sword was damaged by the same malice that also damaged Link's arm. But this does present an interesting opportunity. Fans of the first game bristled at the Master Sword having to also obey the equally controversial, unforgiving weapon durability system of Breath of the Wild. So, having to rebuild the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild 2 presents a chance to redeem that by removing the durability system from the most powerful weapon in Hyrule. The Master Sword shouldn't obey the durability system in Breath of the Wild 2. For both lore and gameplay reasons, oh, I love when people talk about lore. The Master Sword shouldn't have to charge and recharge in Breath of the Wild 2. Considering how many hearts are needed to get the Master Sword, one would think that the Blade of Evil's Bane would be just a bit more useful in a fight. While it doesn't break and disappear like the other weapons in Breath of the Wild, it will take about 10 minutes to recharge once its power is drained. The problem here is that the sword doesn't have nearly enough charge to be of any real use. The weapon goes away after one or two decently large fights, and the cooldown period is far too long for how short a time the player gets with it. Does anyone agree with that? I feel like I had the Master Sword for most of the original game, considering the new weapons Link could receive in Breath of the Wild 2. The solution here is elegant in its simplicity. The Master Sword in Breath of the Wild 2 shouldn't follow the durability system or have charges. Its power should be infinite. There was no reason to have the Master Sword adhere to the durability system, considering the hoops the player has to jump through to get it in the first Breath of the Wild. Okay, so finally, I was waiting to get to this part because it basically wrapped up all the other stuff. He doesn't think that the Master Sword should be allowed to take damage or break, but we literally see it in the cutscene that it's all rusted and damaged and not in the best of shapes. This isn't even the strongest form of the Master Sword either. As many of you all know, the Master Sword has been upgraded previously several times in Wind Waker, Skyward Sword, to get it to its true Master Sword form. Even games like A Link Between Worlds and A Link to the Past leveled the Master Sword up past its true Master Sword form, which is how we get the Golden Sword. And it would make sense that with the Master Sword being previously rusted and taken so much damage, just as Link did, and just as it took Link a long time to recover in Breath of the Wild, it would also make sense that the sword would take a while to recover. I'll talk more on this in a bit, but continuing on with the article. Considering the hoops the player has to jump through to get it in the first Breath of the Wild, and the hoops that will no doubt be needed to get it again in Breath of the Wild 2, first, there's not many hoops you have to jump through, you just need enough hearts to grab it. And second, I don't think we're going to be jumping through any hoops to get the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild 2. I think we're just kind of still going to have it. It's just going to be messed up. And the hoops that he will no doubt be needed to get it again in Breath of the Wild 2. It's far more expedient and rewarding to the player to have it be an ever-reliable weapon against the monsters in the game. It is. It even doubles in powers when you're fighting against certain enemies. And unlike other weapons that do end up breaking and not recharging, this is a pretty medium to high level weapon that you can even upgrade a few times to make it even more powerful, truly making it one of the strongest weapons in the game, and it doesn't magically disappear when it times out. You still have access to it, you just need to wait a bit. And rewarding to the player to have it be an ever-reliable weapon against the monsters in the game. This small change would drastically improve gameplay in Breath of the Wild 2. So basically, to fix Breath of the Wild's biggest mistake, the worst thing about the game, don't have the Master Sword. I feel like some of these articles are written by people who have their boss or their editor message them and be like, hey, do you like Zelda? And they're like, yeah, I played A Link to the Past 30 years ago. And then the editor's like, cool, write an article that we can hurry and post and talk about how they can possibly fix the Master Sword. It's like how every top 10 list for Zelda theories that you see on The Gamer, Screen Rant, Inverse, essentially every single website like that is essentially copied and pasted from each other. And the Zelda theory that's always at number 1 is, you guessed it, Link being dead in Majora's Mask, which can't even be classified as a theory, just crappy fanfiction. And with that theory, we know Link can't be dead in Majora's Mask because with Twilight Princess, we know the small child Link from Majora's Mask ends up growing up, having a family, and eventually his descendant is the Link from Twilight Princess. And when we see the hero shade in Twilight Princess, who is that same Majora's Mask Link, it's obviously an adult skeleton, not a small child skeleton. I'm sure a lot of you remember Daniel and I on the podcast and just doing other standalone videos where we would go through articles and top 10 lists and stuff that a lot of you would send us and debunk any misinformation in them or any clickbait nonsense. And I think we may end up start doing that again because it seems that a lot of you missed it and want us to keep doing it. So here we are. Let's get to those rumors, shall we? Alright everyone, here we go again. You all know how I feel about certain specific leakers or wannabe insiders. And it seems like no matter what article you read, they're always saying the same thing. Well-known Nintendo insider or a Nintendo leaker with a proven track record is teasing or stating this is going to happen. And it's like, did you not do your research before publishing this article? Yes, they have a track record, but like 99% of the stuff they say is wrong. And then usually people only remember the 2 or 3 things that he got correct or she got correct. And some of them can just be attributed to obvious guesses, such as the subject of this article. Because we all know Marky Mark has been saying the same thing about a Zelda collection, an Oracle collection, is going to be releasing in 2019. Like, you can still go find his tweets talking about it. Like, oh, it's going to be releasing in 2019. 6 months later, it's going to be releasing anytime. It's going to be releasing blah blah blah. If Breath of the Wild 2 is end up being delayed outside of 2020, Nintendo will move the Zelda collection of Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD to Breath of the Wild sequels release window. And it's like, well, that game didn't even have a release date in 2020 or 2021, and no collection to make up for it. So anyways, from Nintendo Life, written by Kate Gray. Random, is this cryptic tweet a hint at new Zelda remakes? Here we go again. She says it perfectly. Nintendo leaker Marky Mark is being cagey on Twitter, and with no Zelda news to keep us sane, his latest tweet has got people speculating. Let's take a look at the tweet in question. 𝗏𝗏, choose wisely, blue and red link. A bit on the nose. Right, well, that's not much to go on, is it? That's like us tweeting out a picture of opponent and saying, keep an eye out. Oh my god, this girl's snarkier than I am, I love her. If it turns out to be irrelevant, that's great. If not, we can just delete the tweet and pretend nothing happened. I mean, when you're dealing with this person and like there's a few others out there, the best thing you can do is just giggle and move on and not take any of it serious. Because it's like you're saying the same thing is going to release every 6 months. Like, oh yeah, there's a Zelda collection, maybe even 2 Zelda collections releasing this year. And then you just keep putting it out there every 6 months for like 5 years. Eventually, yeah, it may release. And then it's like, did you really have inside information? Or if you say something's going to release for long enough, eventually it will release. But let's indulge our conspiracy-loving side and get speculation instead. Oracle remakes? Question mark? The most obvious conclusion with 2 links is a remake of the underrated Oracle games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. A Link's Awakening style remake would be quite nice, wouldn't it? Yes, it would be very great. I believe one of his specific rumors about this was that it was going to be a remake of the Oracle games using the engine and assets from Link's Awakening, which I have a video here going very, very in depth on why that is just not going to happen. Like, Nintendo completely moved away from that Link's Awakening engine, which was Unreal Engine, and they're now using Unity. They can still use some of the same character models and other assets, but the engine itself, no. Wind Waker Remake? The Wind Waker HD remake was sadly confined to the Wii U, so it would be nice to have it on the Switch too. The art in 𝗏𝗏's tweet is from Wind Waker, but why the colors? Who knows? No, that's fine. Yeah, he doesn't even know. Like, if you throw enough stuff at the wall, something's going to stick. 2 versions of Breath of the Wild 2. Why is it taking them so long to make Breath of the Wild 2? Is it because there are 2 versions? One where you play a red Link and one where you play a blue Link. That's not what the trailers have been hinting at, but what do we know? Nothing. That's all we know, except that Link got a manky arm. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, Nintendo has 5, maybe 6 different Zelda games in development currently, some of them being unannounced, and well, maybe. There's like Grezzo, Tantalus, Monolith Soft's team. Nintendo themselves still say there's a 2D Zelda team that's working on something, maybe. There's the Breath of the Wild team. So it's like, yeah, with all of that, and the fact that some of those teams, like Grezzo, are always working on at least 1 or 2 different Zelda games at the same time, and they haven't announced a Zelda game since Link's Awakening, and they only work on remasters or remakes, same as Tantalus, for Zelda games. Chances are, yes, there are going to be more remakes or remasters coming, but you can't take yourself seriously if you're just saying the same thing a billion times. And then when it finally happens, you're like, oh, told you guys it was going to happen, and you didn't believe me. Which brings us to our next story. One of the most reliable leakers, Samus Hunter, although lately, I will say, it seems she's getting more and more wrong, whereas last year, it seemed like 99% of the stuff that she had mentioned actually did happen. But if you look at our track record on this channel from last year, that's it's about the same. To a point to where, like, I was wondering if Samus Hunter was maybe possibly perhaps the person or one of the people who had been emailing me, but I ended up figuring who that was. It was just odd that we had similar information a few times. But this year it's kind of gone downhill, but she still ends up getting a lot correct, whether it be, as some speculate, stolen from other leakers. 2, she's great at guessing. 3, she actually has her own sources. Now, one of the iffy leaks that she had mentioned, a Nintendo Direct coming on the 29th of this month. This is all of the recent things she has mentioned on a June Nintendo Direct. Several people have written to me about a possible Direct delay. My information about the status of the conference goes back to the end of May. If I can, I will try to update you on the situation in time. What I can tell you is that early next week, Nintendo will finish the marketing cycle of Mario Kart's DLC 1 and the presentation of 𝗏𝗏, I apologize, the remaining playable character from Xenoblade 3. These 2 things were scheduled before the release of the games, related trailers that will introduce new elements to the game's marketing campaigns. Seems like this was correct. Several titles were also scheduled to appear in show reels as reminders of their upcoming release. and although their dates have already been announced, Nintendo often plans to repeat them in its conferences. And yes, Silksong will not be long in coming. That was another thing that she was right about. There are also other small announcements scheduled in the Direct, such as the Live Alive demo, and a video that will quickly introduce Mario Strikers updates, reminders on the start of the competitive season. We are also close to the announcement of the next N64 games. In addition, there are third-party agreements that guarantee the Direct this month. Ubisoft and Square Enix have not made their conferences pointing to those of other publishers, and therefore, the games they have made agreements with Nintendo will have to appear at the Direct. So with that, I hope to have clarified the situation. June is a rich month, with 3 major games coming out: Strikers, Fire Emblem Warriors, and Sunbreak. Many conferences taking up daily slots. And at the end of the month, there will also be the conference with investors. Direct release windows are not that many, so I see a delay from what has been planned in previous months as difficult. But I do not categorically rule it out, as Nintendo tries to target periods where it turns out to be the last conference after a long series of events. I would say sometimes on that last one. Shortly after, Go Nintendo tweeted a rumor. Very strong evidence points to a Nintendo Direct on June 29th, 2022. I believe Alana Pierce, who I know from when I used to write at Zelda Universe, also mentioned a 29th Direct. Samus quote tweets this: "Yes, I can now confirm it, but expect some news and trailers for already announced games releasing soon on the Switch before that, like Live Alive. It wouldn't surprise me if they are going to release the demo before the Direct." Yeah, with this specifically, Daniel and I spoke about this briefly. I don't want to be rude, but I don't think you can say that there's a big Direct coming, not Xenoblade, Nintendo Direct, in the middle of June, and then when someone else posts their rumor or leak about a big Direct being on the 29th, you quote tweet it and say, "I can now confirm it." So you can't confirm it anyways, though. Like, Nintendo's really the only ones that can confirm it. You can confirm that you heard this, but you already mentioned there's going to be a bunch of stuff in the middle of the month. And now that other people are saying the end of the month, you're saying you can now confirm. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking things. Now, obviously, it is very weird that Nintendo hasn't yet announced their big Nintendo Direct. They do have their financial meeting at the end of the month. And even if we put Samus to the side and go off other people who are actually really well known in the gaming industry and is really great friends with a lot of people in the gaming industry, Alana, that is who I would say is the most reliable, as she actually does know a lot of people and has worked with them before or had them on her channel. So let me know in the comments below, what do you truly, honestly expect if there is a Direct on the 29th? What do you think they will show off, and what would you like to see them show off? If you have any questions you would like for us to answer, or news and topics you would like us to discuss in a video or our podcast, you can leave them below in the comments, and we will get to as many as we can. And if you are a Patreon supporter, we will guarantee that your answer is moved to the top of the list to be answered or discussed first on our podcast, which happens every Thursday at 9:30 Eastern or 6:30 Pacific. Thank you to Riker1, Tramel Shefford, someone whose name is only donated to hear Jesse speak my name and then didn't give me his name, Gene Pinna, Disappointment, Joseph Stewart, ZAIN JIWANI, SOBERX, Mr. Monocled Metroid, David Guthman, Zoe M, Natsu, Jesse Wood, Andremoy, Ashton, Justin Clark, Candy, Chad Costin, Blargnar, Monica Spath, Lovable Christie, and Gus Calvo. I apologize if I got some of your names wrong. Please comment below, or you can message me directly to correct how I pronounced your name. Thank you all for your support, and I hope these videos keep entertaining everyone.